Hello YouTube people, in this video I'm going to show you how I made this butcher's block desk from scratch out of red and white oak. So, I need a desk to edit audio and video on, and I have some very old, extremely rough cut red and white oak that I received as a gift from my grandpa. And I really like butcher block style countertops, so I decided to embark on the very tedious adventure of making my very own butcher block desk. So with this desk design, I decided to make the desk really thick, and instead of using face grain for the top of it, I wanted to make the top all edge grain. I wanted to make the desk about 4 foot long, and you can see me here measuring and marking the length of the desk on these old but very beautifully grained boards. And now I'm cutting these crooked boards to length. Also, I totally forgot to put on my hearing and eye protection. Always use protection, kids. It'll keep you out of a lot of unwanted trouble. Because I'm using edge grain for the top of the butcher block desk, that means that I have to cut a lot of wood to make the top. That also means I had to cut around 27 1-inch by 2-inch thick strips of oak, and before I could rip those pieces on a table saw, I had to take this very much not straight wood and cut straight edges with my cheapo Harbor Freight circular saw guide. That way, when I rip the oak, I would have perfectly straight edges to start from. For being a Harbor Freight tool, this thing hasn't failed me yet. Big ups to Harbor Freight. Now that I have straight edges on all of my big oak boards, it's time to rip the individual pieces for the top of the desk. Because I used that track saw guide earlier, these pieces will be straight and true. Like I said earlier, I wanted to make this table relatively thick, so I'm ripping these strips of wood to 2 inches thick. I like a beefy table. After I'm finished ripping these pieces, they will be turned 90 degrees, so the edge grain will be at the top of the desk. Ripping and more ripping. Okay, I'm not gonna make you guys watch all of this. It took me quite a while to do this. But here is how it looks after I cut all of the 2-inch strips. Still pretty rough, huh? I'm gonna fix that though. So next, I loaded up the oak securely in my classic 2003 Toyota Corolla and drove over to my grandpa's house to use his thickness planer, because mine is broken. My grandpa is a nice guy. Here I'm running the face grain part of the strips of wood through the thickness planer, because the face grain is what I'm going to be gluing together later. So I want to get this wood as flat as humanly possible to minimize the cracks where the individual boards meet. This is pretty similar to how someone would make a cutting board. This desk is essentially a gigantic cutting board. So after planing the boards to almost perfect flatness, this is how they looked when I got back home from my grandpa's house, and I was ready to do a big old glue up. I decided to separate the top of the desk into 2 smaller sections, so that after the glue dried, I would be able to plane each section in the 12.5-inch thickness planer to make the top of the table very flat and even. But before I planed the top of the desk, I decided to address some of the minor gaps on the top of the desk with homemade wood filler. This is made of red and white oak sawdust and mixed with wood glue. You can see me working and mixing it into a paste and filling the gaps. This method is such a better alternative to store-bought wood filler. It's made out of the actual wood you are using for your project. Also, this homemade wood filler takes stain, unlike store-bought stuff. Over the river and through the woods to Grandpa's house I go. This time I am planing the 2 top sections of the desk to equal thickness and also ensuring the top of this desk will be flat. One of the things I really loved about this project was the process of taking these really old, crooked, bowed, and rough oak boards and bending them into submission. With each pass of the planer, this wood is becoming more refined and cultured, a step closer to becoming a beautiful desk. I think it's such a pleasure to be able to work with old hardwoods, and it really does fill me with a sense of joy that this old tree, although sacrificing its life, gets to spend its afterlife with a sense of useful dignity and purpose. I love trees so much. After the top and bottom of this desk were planed, I went back home and started the final glue up. I used 2 different types of wood glue and then brushed it on to cover the entire surface of the joints. You can see me clamping the butcher block top together. These sawhorses were pretty flat, so I used them as a base for my glue up. Next, even though these 2 sections of the desk were planed, I used my belt sander to make sure the glued seam was flat without creating a sanding valley. These things are rarely perfect with this type of stuff. Then, I cut both ends of the desk to make perfectly square and straight edges using my saw guide. Once again, thank you, Harbor Freight. And to add a nice finished looking touch to this butcher block desk, I used my router and a roundover bit on the sides and edges of the tabletop. I really like this look, and aesthetically, it gives the desk a softer feel. And yes, I know I use my router backwards, but that's just how I've always done it. I'm left-handed and I just do things a really weird way. I blame everything on being left-handed. It comes in handy. So now it was time for finish sanding. I used 220 grit sandpaper with a corner cat sander. If you've watched my other videos, you know about my naked standard rule. I want these things smooth. This is how the top looked after sanding. This wood is looking pretty shaped and refined. So here I'm doing the same sanding steps to the bottom of the desk. The bottom always needs to be flat as well, so the table legs sit evenly. I bought these metal desk legs on Facebook Marketplace for $20. I would call that a deal. They are also adjustable. When installing table legs, make sure to take the time to clamp down the leg brackets and to drill pilot holes before you sink your screws. Oak is a pretty hard wood, and you want to make sure your screws are seated properly. Now I am simply twisting the metal desk legs into the receiving brackets. I love it when I don't have to make desk legs for a desk. It's so annoying. And after almost throwing my back out lifting this heavy little guy, this is how it looked with the new legs installed. It's not even rickety. I wanted a pretty natural look for this desk, but with a little tint to highlight the beautiful grain of the wood. So I used a coat of butcher block oil for this purpose. I know that when applied in many coats, butcher block oil is considered its own finish, especially when you need a food-safe finish for kitchen applications. This oil really brings out the beauty of the wood. But since I'm not using this desk in a kitchen application, and since I'm going to be using it a lot, I decided to apply multiple coats of water-based polyurethane. What you are watching here is just the first coat, and I ended up applying 3 coats to this desk for durability, sheen, and great protection. If you want to learn more about how to apply multiple coats of polyurethane, check out my other video about this on our Honest Brothers YouTube channel, which you are on right now. And here's the final result of this butcher block desk. Isn't she magnificent? I couldn't wait to get her inside and start editing video. I also built a little platform for my reference monitors and iMac. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Good luck, woodworkers. Bye-bye.